Things with ADHD that nobody ever really tells you about ADHD. Have you ever wondered if you had ADHD? These are some of those underlying little telltale signs if you have it. If you're new to the channel, hit the like and subscribe button. Being ADHD, I was diagnosed with ADHD right around 13, 14. I started off a lot of trial and error. I've done Ritalin. I've been on Adderall XR. Adderall is actually what I take now for my ADHD. I take 10 milligrams in the morning, 10 milligrams in the afternoon. Being diagnosed with ADHD isn't going in and getting blood work done, anything like that. It is a series of tests, a series of questions. You do a lot of talking with your psychiatrist, and they can determine if you are ADHD or not, and they'll end up putting you on a medication. Unfortunately, there is no natural treatment for ADHD. Now, there are some underlying things that people don't tell you about ADHD that are out there, and these are things that if you are ADHD, you can definitely relate to. And the first one is you are overly competitive, believe it or not. Like, you are overly competitive and everything is a competition and you're a sore loser and you want to win. And there is this massively competitive side to you. And if you don't even believe it, look at some of the athletes out there, like a Michael Phelps, that are ADHD and they are massively competitive. I know I was massively competitive growing up. I had to beat my brother and everything. I had to be number one in everything. There was this mad competition side of me. Another one is we hate to wait. Being impatient is a huge part of it. If you feel like you're waiting for somebody, you want to almost just grab them and be like, hurry up, let's go, let's do this. To try and sit and wait is like just nails on the chalkboard and you're just sitting there rocking like, okay, let's hurry up, let's go. And you're upset because the person said that they were ready, but they're not ready. And you almost get extremely frustrated in your brain and pissed off at the person because now you have to wait. If you have this huge impulsiveness of hating to wait, it can be a huge sign of ADHD. Another one is being stood up. Being ADHD and being like stood up or people canceling plans on you wrecks your brain. It's almost like you get hyper focused and excited about meeting up with somebody or going and doing something with some friends. And if they call and cancel on you, it's like a massive wave of depression hits over you. You feel let down and it's almost like you take it differently where most people, someone can cancel plans and, oh, okay, I'm going to go do this anyhow. And you take off and you go do this. Well, somebody with ADHD, you're like devastated. It can ruin your whole entire day and you are like locked onto that this person let me down. And you become hyper-focused, you forget about everything else, and you work yourself up and you're very, very upset. So one of the things that you might not realize is if you have this just massive letdown, massive wave of depression that hits you, it could be ADHD. A big one also is that you move and you twitch a lot. Like you twitch and you almost stim. Like you'll find yourself doing just weird things to your body or like just moving around. It can be a sign of ADHD. It's something that a lot of people don't talk about, even when it comes to outbursts. Outbursts is another thing that's big. You just kind of outburst weird stuff. Like you could be in the middle of a conversation and next thing you look at people and you're like, okay, I want to go home. And they're like, wait, where did that come from? What's going on? And you just had this outburst. And it's like, you almost don't fully control your thought process and your thoughts get so overwhelming that you just kind of spurt them out. And that is something that people with ADHD do struggle with. A big one too is just making random noises. Like I'm bad with, I'll even sit there and just start doing weird things and making weird noises. And it's like my brain gets fixated on that noise and you start making just random noises or you do random things that just, and next thing you know, it's like normal to you. And people are like, dude, are you okay? Like, what's wrong with you? That is a sign that you may have ADHD. And again, these are things that a lot of people don't talk about. Anger is a big one. Anger was probably the worst one that I had to deal with ADHD that a lot of times people don't speak about is the temper. When you're ADHD, why at least I had the temper is I always felt misunderstood and I could get enraged if somebody assumed something about me or they didn't talk to me about something. Or even if I was having a conversation, they weren't seeing like my side of it or seeing what I was seeing in my head or the vision of it. And next thing you know, I'd get very angry. I'd get upset with somebody. To argue with me was very, very difficult because if it got to the point where I felt that you didn't understand or you weren't listening to me or that you weren't understanding, at least validating in a sense of what I was saying to say, hey, okay, I see what you're saying, but you're still wrong. It was like I felt stupid inside, and I could feel like this anger build up inside of me, and it would just lead to this massive outburst of rage. It was extremely difficult for me, and it was one of the hardest things I had to work through being ADHD. And these were things that like no one ever told me about. A big one was the object permanence. No one ever told me about the object permanence and how you literally can forget people. Like your brain literally forgets people. And then when next thing you know, when you talk to them, in your brain, it's like you just saw them yesterday, but maybe you hadn't talked to them for months. That's another thing that can happen with ADHD. You forget to talk to somebody for like a week, and all of a sudden your brain has forgotten about them. And next thing you know, something hits, and you're like, oh, hey, I wonder how so-and-so's doing. You hit them up, and it was like you just talked to them yesterday, and they're like, dude, I haven't talked to you in forever. And you're like, oh, how long has it been? Dude, it's been a year. And you're like, man, that long? Well, what have you been up to? And you don't compute that like, hey, we have to like kind of slowly re-engage because I haven't talked to you in a long time. If you're struggling and you think that you might have ADHD, one of the worst things that you can do is self-diagnose yourself. ADHD is very similar to bipolar. It has some similarities to different things out there, even when it comes to autism. Make sure that you get tested. If you don't feel that the doctor did it correctly or you feel you're misdiagnosed, see another therapist, get a second opinion. Never be afraid, but get with a doctor. Don't self-diagnose because, especially when it comes to ADHD, medication is a lifesaver. And you know what? Don't be afraid of meds because they're tools for you. Adderall for me is a lifesaver. I couldn't function without it. If you are struggling out there, reach out for help. Tell people that you're struggling and get the help that you need because it gets a lot better.